When the doctor told me something was wrong, I expected my wife to be my anchor. Instead, she became the storm. I didn't notice it at first, but while I fought for my life, she quietly drifted into someone else's arms. It started with exhaustion I could not explain. At first, I blamed work. Long days, late nights, too much coffee, and not enough sleep. The kind of slow collapse adults like to romanticize as hustle. I would come home, drop my bag by the door, loosen my tie, and she would already be on the couch scrolling through her phone, the blue light painting her face in a color I convinced myself was just tiredness. "You look wiped," she would say, without looking up most of the time. "Yeah, just a long day," I would answer, even when my bones felt like they were filled with wet sand. I ignored the dizziness, I ignored the headaches, I ignored the weight I was losing, the way my belt wrapped tighter around my waist even though I was eating the same. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was getting older. I told myself anything except the truth, which was that something inside me was quietly failing. She noticed before I admitted it. That is the part that still stings. She saw it, named it, and then later used it as her alibi. "You should see a doctor," she said one night, her voice flat, eyes glued to a show on the television. "You look worse than you think." It bothered me that she did not sound worried, just annoyed, like my body was an inconvenience she was forced to live with. Still, I made the appointment. Half because I knew she was right, half because I wanted to prove her wrong. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old magazines. A television in the corner played some daytime show with people arguing about paternity tests. My name was called, and I stood up too fast. The room spun, and I grabbed the side of the chair without meaning to. "You okay, man?" someone asked behind me. I nodded and pretended I was fine. That was my specialty back then, pretending. The doctor was calm, a little too calm. Middle-aged, glasses, the kind of man whose voice never seemed to rise or fall. He asked about my symptoms. I listed them, minimizing everything, like I was reciting a grocery list. Fatigue, headaches, occasional chest tightness, some dizziness, nothing serious. I laughed after saying that, like I needed him to join me in the lie. He did not laugh. He checked my blood pressure. It was too high. He ordered tests, blood work, imaging, the kind of things that take you from thinking you have a minor problem to realizing your body might be a trap you are living in. My wife did not come to that first appointment. She said she had a meeting. Important, hard to move. I said it was fine. I told her it was no big deal. I did not want to scare her with my anxiety, so I hid it, protecting her from what terrified me. A week later, I was back in his office, sitting in the same chair, the same smell of disinfectant, the same television in the waiting room still looping strangers' dramas. Only this time, my wife was there, sitting 2 seats away from me, arms crossed, staring at the floor. "Thanks for coming," I whispered. She shrugged. "I had time today." It sounded like a favor, like she had squeezed my potential diagnosis in between errands. When the doctor called us in, my hands were already sweating. He closed the door behind us, sat down, and folded his hands on top of a thin folder that suddenly looked very heavy. He started with my name, then the word results, then that soft, rehearsed tone that doctors use for bad news. "There are some concerning findings," he said. "We need to monitor this very closely. It is not something we can ignore." I heard a handful of words after that: chronic, risk, treatment, lifestyle changes, possible complications. It felt like someone had opened a trapdoor under my life. I was falling while still sitting in the chair. I looked at my wife. This was the moment I thought she would reach for my hand. This was the moment I believed everything meaningless would dissolve, and we would stand on the same side of the fear. She did not move. She stared past the doctor, eyes focused on some invisible point on the wall behind his shoulder. Her jaw was tight, not with grief, with impatience. "So, what does that mean?" she asked, cutting into his explanation. "Is he going to die, or what? Because you are saying a lot of words that do not sound like answers." Her voice was sharp enough to make the doctor flinch.
He explained again, slower this time. No immediate death sentence, but not nothing either. Something real, something serious, something that would change how I lived. I tried to ask questions, but my tongue felt thick. She did most of the talking, except her questions were not about me. Not really. How long is the treatment? How much will this cost? Will he still be able to work? How often do we have to come in? We, she said, but it already felt like a lie. On the drive home, the silence in the car was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. I kept waiting for her to say something soft. I am here. We will get through this. I love you. Any of the phrases you hear in movies when one person's life tilts off its axis. Instead, the first thing she said was, "You need to tell your boss. They are not going to like this." "My boss?" I repeated, staring at the road. "That is what you are thinking about right now? What do you want me to think about?" she snapped. "You being sick does not just affect you. It affects everything." There was a moment, just a second, when I saw it clearly. The resentment, the fear not of losing me, but of losing the life she thought she was promised. I saw it and then buried it, under excuses. She is scared. She does not know how to process this. She will come around. Denial is not just refusing to believe something about yourself. It is also rewriting someone else so you can keep loving them. At home, she moved through the house like a guest. She put her bag down, checked her phone, typed a message, smiled faintly at whatever flashed across the screen, and then locked it before I could see. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just work," she answered, too quickly. She started going out more after that. Errands, meetings, drinks with friends. Gym sessions she had never once cared about before. I told myself she needed an outlet, a way to handle the stress. "Everyone copes differently," I repeated like a mantra, even as the bed grew colder on her side. At night, I lay awake listening to the sound of her shower when she came home late. The water hit the tiles too long, like she was trying to wash something off that I could not see. Sometimes she would slide into bed and turn away from me without a word. Sometimes she would scroll on her phone until her screen lit the ceiling rather than my face. "Are you okay?" I asked once, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am tired," she said. That was all. I wanted to tell her I was terrified, that every strange ache felt like a countdown, that every appointment made me feel less like a man and more like a body being managed. But when I turned toward her, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. People say illness reveals who really loves you. What they do not say is that sometimes the revelation does not come all at once. It bleeds in slowly, into small moments. The hand that does not reach for yours. The empty chair in the waiting room. The way someone says "we" when they really mean you. I held on to the idea of us as tightly as I could. I told myself this was just a phase, that once the treatment started, once we had a routine, once the fear settled into something familiar, she would come back to me. I did not know that my diagnosis had already given her something too, a reason to slip away, an excuse everyone would accept. A story where she would always be the one who had suffered enough. Before all of this, before doctors and test results and late-night drives alone, I used to believe our marriage was solid, not perfect, but real. The kind of relationship that had been through enough small storms to convince me it could handle the big ones. We met at a friend's housewarming party. The apartment was too small for the number of people packed inside it, and the air smelled like cheap wine and takeout. I remember standing in the kitchen, pretending to be interested in a conversation about cryptocurrency, when I heard her laugh from the living room. It cut through everything, not because it was loud, but because it sounded like she knew something the rest of us did not. I drifted toward the sound, stepping past half-familiar faces and forgotten names, and found her sitting on the arm of a couch, a plastic cup in one hand, her other hand moving as she talked. She was telling a story, something about getting locked out of her apartment in the rain, and even though the story itself was ordinary, the way she told it was not. She made herself the punchline without making herself small. When her eyes met mine for the first time, she smiled like we were already sharing a secret. "You look bored," she said, when I finally got close enough. I laughed, caught off guard. "I am," I admitted. She grinned. "Then come sit here. Bored people should stick together." That was her talent in the beginning, pulling me out of corners, convincing me that life could be lighter if I let it. We spent the rest of the night talking on that couch, ignoring the rest of the party, until people started leaving and our friend began stacking empty cups.
We went on our first date 3 days later. Coffee turned into a walk turned into dinner turned into her falling asleep on my shoulder during a late movie, her hair smelling like some floral shampoo I can still remember even now. She fit into my life so quickly that it felt less like starting something new and more like remembering something I had misplaced. She was the kind of woman who filled a room, not just with noise, but with intention. She had plans, lists, expectations. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" she asked me on our third date, like she was conducting an interview. "With you still sitting across from me," I said, half joking, half not. She rolled her eyes, but she smiled. "Not bad," she said. "Try again, though. Real answer." We built a life on answers like that. Serious wrapped in playful, hope wrapped in sarcasm. We moved in together after a year, got married after 2. The wedding was small, just family, a few close friends, simple food, too much wine, and a song she insisted we dance to even though I hated dancing. "You are stiff," she whispered as we swayed. "I am nervous," I said. "Why? You already married me." That was how we were. She pushed, I yielded. She spoke first, I processed after. She made decisions quickly, confidently. I took my time, weighed options. We told ourselves we balanced each other out. There were warning signs, if I am honest, not of this, not of the way she would eventually break me, but of how she handled discomfort. She did not like being around sick people. Hospitals made her restless. When her aunt was diagnosed with cancer, she visited once, then sent flowers the rest of the time. She said it was better that way, that her aunt would not want people seeing her like that. I told myself it was just her way of protecting herself. If someone cried in front of her, she would freeze for a second before offering comfort that sounded more like instruction. "You will get through it. You are strong. You are fine." It always kept a safe distance between her and the other person's pain. I did not realize that one day that distance would be between her and me. The first crack in our illusion came long before the doctor said anything was wrong. It was subtle, little things. She stopped asking how my day was and started telling me about hers instead. She stayed at work later, came home already half inside her phone. When I tried to bring up anything heavy, she either changed the subject or found a way to make it about logistics. We should save more. We should move somewhere bigger. We should think about kids soon. Kids. The word used to make my chest feel warm. I pictured a smaller version of her running around, laughing, filling the house with the same life she brought into that overcrowded apartment the night we met. Later, when the fatigue started, I would catch her looking at me in a way that was not loving or even annoyed. It was calculating, like she was running numbers in her head. Time, money, risk, the math of commitment. I remember one night in particular, a few months before I finally went to the doctor. We were eating dinner, takeout again, because we were both too tired to cook. I had barely touched my food, just pushing it around with my fork, trying to swallow against the lump in my throat that had nothing to do with the food. "You are not eating," she said. "I am just not hungry," I answered. "You have not been hungry for days." I shrugged. "Maybe I am getting sick." She looked at me for a long second, then back at her plate. "We cannot afford for you to get sick," she muttered. It was quiet, almost under her breath, but I heard it. I joked it away. "Do I need to check our insurance policy?" I asked. She did not laugh. Instead, she wiped her mouth with a napkin, stood up, and took her plate to the sink. "I have to finish something for work," she said. "Do not wait up." She disappeared into the spare room that had become her unofficial office. I sat there alone with my cold food and the echo of her words. "We cannot afford for you to get sick." Back then, I interpreted it as stress, money worries, fear. I did not see it as a warning about what I was becoming in her eyes, a liability.
When the doctor finally delivered his measured verdict, it did not come out of nowhere for her. I think, deep down, she had suspected something serious before I did, maybe even before I admitted anything was wrong. Looking back, I can trace the timeline. The moment she suggested I see a doctor, her voice too flat to be simple concern. The sudden increase in evenings she was too busy to sit down and talk. The way she had started sleeping closer to the edge of the bed, her body angled away from mine. All the signs that she was already building an exit route in her head. I remember an afternoon a week after my diagnosis, before my treatment schedule had even been fully laid out. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the television without hearing a word of what was being said. She was in the kitchen, talking quietly on the phone. Normally, she spoke loudly, enough for sound to spill from room to room. That day, her voice was soft, almost gentle, a tone I realized I had not heard from her in weeks, maybe months. "Yeah," she whispered, "it is bad." Pause. "No, I'm fine." Long pause. "I just have to figure out what I am going to do." Something in my chest tightened. I turned the volume up on the television just enough that it would make sense if she thought I could not hear her, then tried to listen anyway. "I will call you later," she said. "He is here." When she hung up and walked back into the living room, her face shifted. The softness vanished. She picked up the remote, changed the channel, then looked at me like I was just another piece of furniture. "You should rest," she said. "You look pale." "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just a friend." "Which friend?" She frowned. "Does it matter?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say that every detail suddenly mattered now that my future felt fragile. Instead, I nodded and lied to both of us. "No, just curious." The distance between us was no longer a feeling. It was geography. Me on the couch, her at the edge of the room. Me inside a diagnosis, her already stepping outside of it. Before the illness, if something went wrong, we tackled it together.
A car problem, a job issue, a fight with family. We would sit at the table, talk it out, write numbers on scrap paper, make plans. Now, when I tried to bring up my fears about treatment or side effects, she would check her phone, sigh, and say things like, "We will deal with it when it happens," or "I cannot think about this all day. I have enough on my plate." Enough on her plate. As if my body had turned into another chore she had not signed up for. The worst part is that I excused it. I told myself I was lucky she was still here at all, that if I were in her shoes, I might be acting strangely too. I was so afraid of losing her that I did not see she was already halfway gone. And while I was busy rewriting her in my head as stressed and scared, she was rewriting the story of our marriage somewhere else, with someone else. The late nights were becoming more frequent, the vague explanations, the brushed-off details, the phone always face down, always on silent. It would take only one slip, one small mistake for the truth to finally show itself. But before that moment, there was a night that marked the true beginning of the end, even if I did not recognize it then. The first time she did not come home on time. The first time I lay in bed alone, watching the red numbers of the clock crawl past midnight, then 1, then 2, waiting for a front door that stayed closed. The first night she did not come home on time was supposed to be nothing. That is what I kept telling myself as the hours stretched. She said she was having dinner with coworkers, something she had done before, although not often. She reminded me that one of them was leaving the company, so they were doing a small farewell gathering. I told her to have fun, to enjoy the night. I told her I would be fine. That is the part that haunts me now. I told her I would be fine. I kept replaying that sentence in my head as the digital clock beside the bed shifted from 10 in the evening to 10:15, then 10:40. I tried to distract myself with television, but the sound grated on my nerves. I tried reading, but the words blurred together like they were sliding off the page. Eventually, I turned everything off and just sat in silence, listening to the house breathe around me. The night felt longer than any I had experienced until then, like the darkness had weight. I would check my phone every few minutes, even though there were no notifications. I thought about calling her, but I did not want to seem needy.
She had been distant ever since the diagnosis, and I did not want to push her farther away. At 11:42, I sent a message. "Hope everything is okay. Let me know when you are on your way home." The message sat there, delivered but unread. I watched the status like it was a heartbeat, waiting for that tiny shift that never came. By midnight, my chest had tightened again. It was not pain, not exactly. More like a pressure that came from somewhere deeper. I took the medication the doctor had given me just to be safe. The water felt cold and heavy as it went down. When it reached 12:30, I finally called. The phone rang twice before going to voicemail.
I tried again, voicemail. I stared at the ceiling, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen drifting through the walls. Everything felt distant except for the slow ache building inside my ribs. Around 1 in the morning, I heard a car outside. I sat up, listening for the familiar rhythm of her footsteps on the walkway. Nothing. The car door closed. A moment later, the engine started again and faded down the street. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. People stay out late sometimes. Maybe she lost track of time. Maybe her phone died. Maybe there was bad reception. So many maybes, all of them flimsy, paper-thin excuses meant to hold together a reality that was already splitting apart. At 1:37, the screen finally lit up. A text message. Heading home soon. Soon. Not now, not on the way, not even an apology. Just soon. I typed back immediately. "Okay, are you all right?" No answer. I sat in the dark, repeating her last message in my head. Soon. It sounded careless, detached, like I was someone she was obligated to inform, not someone she wanted to come home to. At 2:10, I heard the front door open. The lock clicked, the hinges whispered, and she stepped inside. I waited for her to call out my name, to ask if I was awake, but she did not. Instead, I heard the soft thud of her shoes being kicked off, the rustle of her bag, and then her footsteps moving quietly toward the hallway. I forced my voice steady. "You are home late." She froze. The silence that followed stretched thin enough to tear. "I thought you were asleep," she said finally. I could not. I was worried. Her sigh drifted through the darkness like smoke. She turned on the bedroom light, blinking at the brightness, avoiding my eyes as she changed clothes. "Dinner went long," she said. "We were talking. I did not notice the time. You could have answered my calls." My phone died. I glanced at the small glowing rectangle in her hand. It did not look dead at all. I did not mention it. "I am going to shower," she said, ending the conversation before it could begin. I listened to the water running behind the bathroom door. A strange numbness washed over me as I realized how familiar this felt. The long shower, the late arrival, the silence that had nothing to do with exhaustion. I remembered the last few weeks. The phone always face down, the whispered conversations, the sudden interest in places she never cared about before. It was like watching a puzzle rearranging itself until the image became painfully clear. When she came out of the bathroom, her hair was wet, and she looked at me with impatience rather than guilt. "You were still awake?" she said, like it was an inconvenience. I did not answer. I could not trust myself to speak. She climbed into bed and turned away from me without saying goodnight. I stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I tried to tell myself it was just one night, a mistake, a miscommunication, stress, anything but what it actually was. I spent the day trying to reason with myself instead of confronting her. I told myself people drift during hard times, that illness pushes partners apart sometimes before pulling them back together. I read articles about it online, trying to reassure myself that her behavior was normal, that she just needed space. But space had already become distance. Distance had become absence, and absence is just the shadow of someone who has already left. Over the next week, she started coming home late more often, not every night, but enough to shift the balance of our routine. She stopped sitting next to me on the couch, stopped touching me at all. Even her voice changed. It lost the softness she used to reserve for me. When she spoke, she sounded like she was delivering information, not sharing life.
One evening, she brought home takeout but ordered food I did not like, things she knew I could not eat with my new diet. When I reminded her gently, she shrugged. "I forgot," she said, then added, "You can pick it off." It was small, maybe even insignificant, but it told me everything. She was no longer thinking about me at all. The following morning, I noticed something else, a scent. Not perfume, but the echo of someone else's cologne clinging faintly to her jacket. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A scent that did not belong in our home. "Whose is that?" I asked. She paused, then sniffed the jacket casually. "Probably from the restaurant," she said, "or the Uber." She said it with such confidence that I almost doubted myself. Almost. But the truth was beginning to gather behind my ribs in a slow, steady burn. 2 days later, while I was folding laundry, her phone buzzed on the dresser. She was in the shower again. I did not plan to check it, I swear I didn't. But when the screen lit up, I saw the name. Just a first name, a man's name. And beneath it, the preview of the message. "I miss you." 3 words. Simple. Innocent in another context. Devastating in mine. I stared at it without breathing. My hands trembled. My throat tightened. The world seemed to tilt, everything sliding off its edges. "I miss you." My wife was in the shower, humming a song I had not heard her sing in months, and somewhere out there was a man who missed her. I should have opened the message. I should have demanded answers. I should have walked into the bathroom and asked the question that had been slowly poisoning me. Instead, I froze. Maybe because I already knew the answer. Maybe because I was too scared to open the final door. Maybe because part of me still believed she would choose me if I confronted her with softness instead of anger. I put her phone back exactly where it was, screen down, and walked to the kitchen in a fog. The kettle clicked on, the hum of boiling water filled the room. I leaned on the counter, my breath shallow, the message replaying itself behind my eyes. "I miss you." Those 3 words were the first undeniable crack in the story I had been trying to hold together. But denial is a powerful drug, and part of me still clung to the hope that there was some explanation. There was not. That message was not a mistake. It was the beginning of the truth. The truth that my illness had not driven her away. It had given her the permission she needed to walk into someone else's arms. And soon, I would learn the full extent of what she had already done. The turning point did not arrive as a dramatic explosion. It came quietly, almost gently, like the final drop of water that makes a full glass overfall. A small moment that should have meant nothing, but instead changed everything. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, one of those gray days where the sky seems to hang low enough to touch. I had stayed home from work because my doctor insisted I needed rest. The fatigue had gotten worse. Some mornings I felt like gravity had doubled its pull on me, anchoring my limbs to the mattress. That day was one of those mornings. She left for work without looking at me. I told myself she was just rushed. I always told myself that. I watched her pick up her purse, slip into her coat, grab her keys, check her phone, and walk out without a goodbye. The door clicked behind her like a period at the end of a sentence I did not want to read. Around noon, I made myself a cup of tea and tried to watch something, but my mind wandered too much to focus. I kept replaying the message I saw on her phone. "I miss you." The softness of those words haunted me, not because someone else said them, but because part of her must have wanted to hear them. She had not spoken to me like that in months. After hours of pacing, I finally decided to get some air. I stepped outside, wrapped in a jacket that felt heavier than it should have. The air was cool, the kind that wakes you up a little, and I started walking, hoping my mind would settle. I ended up passing by her office. It was not intentional. At least, that is what I told myself. I just wandered in that direction out of habit. But when I approached the building, something felt off. I expected to see the usual bustle. Her office always had people coming in and out, phones ringing, people hunched over laptops through the windows. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. A sign on the door caught my eye. "Office closed today for system maintenance." Closed. Closed, but she had left that morning saying she had a full day of meetings. My heart beat hard enough to make my vision blur for a second. I stood there staring at the sign, trying to make sense of it. I pulled out my phone and checked her location like I was checking the weather. Nothing loaded. Her location was turned off. My hands felt cold. I walked around the building, hoping maybe there were people inside anyway. Maybe she forgot. Maybe the sign was old. Anything to stop the tightness growing in my chest. But the building was dark, every window empty. She had not gone to work. She had lied. I walked back home faster than I realized. The whole time my mind spun in circles. Maybe she was at a cafe. Maybe she had an appointment. Maybe she was running errands she forgot to mention. The lies I told myself were more comforting than the truth I had already begun to accept. When I reached our street, there was a car parked 2 houses down. A sleek black car I did not recognize. A man was inside, sitting, waiting. I could not see much of him except the shape, the posture. When he looked up from his phone, I turned away quickly, pretending I had not noticed. But something in his expression flickered with recognition. When I stepped inside the house, the air felt different, heavy again, but for a new reason. I walked into the kitchen, set my keys down, and then I heard it, her voice. Not on the phone, not in the hallway, but in the living room. She was home. She was home early, and she had not texted me. I walked slowly toward the sound, not sure what I was about to find. When I turned the corner, she was sitting on the couch, her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, not the polite, forced laugh she used with coworkers. It was the warm laugh she used to reserve for me. "Yeah," she whispered, "I miss you too. I told you I would find time today." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. My hands trembled, not from fear, from the confirmation I had been trying so desperately to avoid. She did not see me. I stood there frozen, watching her lean back against the cushions, eyes half closed in a softness I had not seen in months. "No, he is out," she said quietly. "He will not be home until later. I can talk." I heard the man's voice faintly through the phone, a low tone, familiar somehow, familiar enough that a chill ran through me, though I could not place it yet. She giggled, actually giggled. A sound that once pulled me toward her now shoved me back. I stepped forward without meaning to. My foot hit the edge of the carpet, making a sound. She jumped and turned around. The blood drained from her face so quickly it was like watching a mask melt. I stood there, hollow and shaking, unable to speak. She whispered my name. She ended the call immediately, hands shaking as she fumbled with the screen. Then she set the phone down slowly, like she could undo the moment by moving gently enough. "What are you doing home?" she asked, her voice tight. The question hit me like a slap. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "You scared me." Not, "I can explain." "What are you doing home?" The words exposed everything. I stared at her, trying to find something left to hold on to. Anything. "You lied," I said quietly. She stood up. "No, I did not. I just forgot to tell you something. Your office is closed today." She froze. I went by there. Her jaw clenched, a muscle twitching near her cheek. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then closed it again. Her eyes flicked to her phone, then away. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, though we both knew. She shook her head. "A coworker." The lie was so thin it disintegrated in the air between us. I stepped closer. "He said he misses you." Her mouth opened again, but no words came out. "How long?" I asked. She looked at me with something that was not guilt or sorrow. It was irritation, like I had interrupted something. "Why does it matter?" she snapped. "You have been sick for months. Everything has been about you. I needed someone to talk to." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. She continued before I could respond. "I have been alone in this too, you know. Do you think it is easy watching you fall apart? Do you think it is fun living with fear every day?" My voice cracked. "You did not have to do it alone. I am right here." She laughed, a soft, cruel sound. "You are not here. You are sick. You are tired. You barely talk. You barely touch me. You barely live." I felt something inside me tear. "You used my illness?" I whispered. She inhaled sharply, her eyes flashing. "Do not twist this. I did not use anything. I just slipped. Things happen. People change. You changed." I stood there, staring at the woman I had shared a life with, realizing I no longer recognized her. The distance I had been feeling for months was not distance at all. It was abandonment. "Who is he?" I asked again. She looked down at her hands, then up at me. Her eyes were strangely calm now. "You know him," she said. The room tilted. "He has been around," she added. My pulse hammered in my ears. She took a slow breath, like she was preparing herself. "It is someone who understands me, someone who listens, someone who does not make me feel trapped in a dying marriage." Her words hit me like a knife. Then she said his name, and the world went silent. She said his name, and for a moment I genuinely could not process it. The room felt airless, like every molecule had paused to watch what I would do next. I stood there, staring at her lips, as though they might undo the sounds they had already spilled. His name echoed through my head again and again, each repetition settling deeper, heavier. It was Daniel, my friend. Not my best friend, not someone I saw every weekend, but someone who had been around for years, someone we both knew, someone who had been to our home, someone she had hugged goodbye in front of me more times than I could count. Daniel. I laughed. I did not mean to. It burst out of me, a sharp, disbelieving sound that tasted like metal. Her face tightened. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Laugh, like this is some big joke?" I shook my head slowly. "I am not laughing because it is funny. I am laughing because it does not make sense." She crossed her arms. "It makes perfect sense. You just do not want to see it." "No," I said softly. "No, I really do not." But I did see it. In flashes. Memories that had seemed harmless until now. Moments that had blended into the background until her confession rewired them with new meaning. The night she insisted we go to his birthday, even though I was exhausted. When she spent half the evening talking to him in the kitchen, while I sat alone in the living room pretending not to care. The time he came over to help us move furniture, and she laughed so loudly at something he said that I looked up from the toolbox just to watch the way her hand brushed his arm. The night she asked me if I thought he seemed lonely lately. I shrugged, not realizing she was fishing for empathy she had already tied to him. Every moment rearranged itself into a story I had not known I was living. "How long?" I asked again, my voice barely a breath. She looked away. Her silence was a confession all on its own. "Tell me," I pressed. She exhaled slowly. "A few months." Months. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the heaviness expanding in my chest. My illness had been getting worse for months. My diagnosis had come months after that. She had not pulled away because she was scared of losing me. She had already started separating her life from mine before I ever stepped into the doctor's office. "Why him?" I whispered, though I was not sure I wanted the answer. She stiffened. "Because he listens. Because he makes me feel alive. Because when I talk to him, I feel seen." I stared at her, stunned by her honesty. Or maybe it was not honesty. Maybe it was cruelty disguised as truth. "So this is my fault?" I said. She hesitated. "I am not saying that." "You are," I said quietly. "You are saying I got sick, so you needed someone healthy to run to. That is not fair." "Fair," I repeated, the word sour on my tongue. "Fair is something I stopped expecting the moment the doctor told me what I was facing." She rubbed her forehead like she was the one in pain. "You do not understand. I did not mean for this to happen." "Then why did it?" "Because I was drowning," she snapped. I looked at her hands. The same hands that had once held me during thunderstorms, during job losses, during grief. Hands that had steadied me when my world felt uncertain. Now they were shaking, not from guilt, but from frustration. Drowning in what? I asked. In this house, in this marriage, in you always being tired, in not knowing if you would get better, in feeling like I was disappearing next to you. I swallowed hard. So you found someone else? She met my gaze without flinching. I found someone who made me feel alive again. The words sliced me open. I turned away, because I knew if I held her gaze any longer, I would fall apart in front of her. My vision blurred, my pulse hammered against my throat. You should go, I said. She blanked. What? Leave, for now. I cannot look at you right now. She hesitated. And where am I supposed to go? To him, I said, the words escaping before I could soften them. Her lips parted. For a second she looked like she might argue. Then she closed her mouth again, her expression flat and disturbed. I am not going to him, she said quietly. Then where? She picked up her purse slowly, like the weight of it had doubled. I will go to my sister's. I nodded, refusing to look at her too closely. I knew that if I did, if I let myself see her face, the grief swelling inside me would break loose and drown me. She stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something, maybe a plea, maybe a fight, maybe for me to stop her. She had always wanted attention more than accountability, but I stayed silent. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded eerily familiar. It reminded me of the first time she had walked out late at night, that same quiet finality, that same sense that something was slipping beyond my reach. I sank onto the couch, pressing my palms into my eyes until stars burst against the darkness. My chest felt tight again, not the medical kind of tightness, something deeper, something emotional, jagged, raw. I thought of Daniel, of his confident smile, his easy posture, the way he always seemed to talk to her more than anyone else in the room. The night he told me I was lucky to have her. The night he clapped me on the back and said she was one of a kind. The nights I never questioned why he seemed to be around when she was happiest. I sat there until the afternoon light shifted into evening. The house felt hollow. My body felt heavy. My throat felt bruised from holding back what I did not have the energy to express. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We should talk. I stared at it for a full minute. Slowly, deliberately, I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. Daniel. A cold, electric dread slid down my spine. I did not respond, but he did. I am outside. My heart slammed hard enough that I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. I walked to the window with shaky legs and looked out. He was standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the house, watching me, waiting. I did not go outside right away. I stood at the window, half hidden behind the curtain, staring at him as the daylight thinned into evening. The street lamps flickered on one by one, each glow stretching his shadow across the pavement until it reached the base of our walkway. He looked calm, not nervous, not ashamed, calm in a way that made my stomach twist. Finally, I stepped away from the window, grabbed my jacket out of habit, then realized I did not need it. I was not going anywhere. He was. When I opened the door, the cold air rushed in. He lifted his head slowly, like he had been expecting me at that exact moment. "We should talk," he said again. I leaned against the doorframe, exhausted in a way that went deeper than my illness. Talk about what? He took a few steps forward, but I held up a hand. "Stay there." His jaw flexed, but he stopped. I realized that he thought he owed me something, an explanation, a confession, yet the way he stood told me he did not feel guilty. Not really. People who feel guilty fold into themselves. He looked steady, balanced, like a man who had justified every step that led him here. "I know you saw her with me," he said quietly. A sick heat rose in my chest. "I did not see anything," I said. "She told me." He exhaled through his nose, the breath curling in the cold. "Then there is nothing to hide." That sentence should have ignited rage in me. Instead, it felt like a confirmation of everything I had already accepted. A final nail in a coffin I did not build. "How long?" I asked. His eyes flickered. I knew he was calculating the details. The truth would not be clean. People who betray always spend time choosing which version hurts least. "Around the time you started getting sick," he said. Time stretched, sound muted. My skin prickled. Around the time I started getting sick? So she went to you while I was falling apart. He hesitated. She said she felt alone. I laughed once, sharp and hollow. "And you felt what? Helpful?" His expression tightened. It was not like that. Of course it was not. Liars never think they are lying. They think they are rescuing, healing, filling some void created by someone else's failure. He stepped a little closer, and I could see the faint tremor in his fingertips. Not fear of me. Fear of losing the fantasy he had built. "She told me things," he said.
Things that made me worried about her. Things like what? He paused. That you shut her out. That your illness changed you. That you were angry all the time. I stared at him. I was scared, not angry. He nodded once. I believe that, now. But she made it sound like she had no one. I pressed a hand against my chest because the air felt too thin. "So you stepped in," I whispered. He lifted his shoulders helplessly. "I did not plan it. No one ever does," I said. "It just happens." He swallowed. There was something strange in his eyes, something like pity. "Do not blame her," he said softly. "She was hurting." My vision darkened around the edges. My hands curled into fists even though I was too weak to swing them. Too weak to do anything but stand. "She was hurting," I repeated, as if the words were acid on my tongue. And what was I? An inconvenience. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His breath fogged in the cold air. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, shoulders stiffening. "You want the truth?" he said. "She told me that being with you felt like being trapped, that she could not breathe, that she felt guilty for feeling that way, but she needed something, someone. Someone who was not dying," I said quietly. He flinched, the first real reaction he had shown. I did not answer that. He did not need to. The silence between us was so cold it felt brittle. Finally, he straightened. "I think you should know she is not coming back tonight." A slow exhale escaped me. "I know. She needs space," he added. "Do not speak for her," I said. I expected anger or arrogance, but he actually nodded, like he understood something had shifted. He took one step back, then another. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. My voice was low. "But you did." He nodded again. Then he turned and walked toward the black car parked down the street. I watched him get inside. The headlights flashed on, the engine hummed to life. He drove away without looking back. When the sound of his car finally faded, I walked back inside and closed the door quietly. The house felt colder than the street outside. Every shadow seemed unfamiliar. Every piece of furniture felt like it belonged to a different life. My body shook, not from illness this time, from everything else. I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, hands buried in my hair. The evening passed in slow, aching minutes. I did not cry. I think I was past that. My tears had been used up in the months of slow abandonment. Betrayal does not always arrive like a hurricane. Sometimes it arrives as a slow leak that finally empties the entire room. Hours later, the front door opened. She stepped inside quietly, as if she were entering someone else's home. Her eyes were swollen. Her coat hung loosely around her. When she saw me sitting there, she froze. "We need to talk," she whispered. "No," I said. "You need to talk. I need to listen, for once." She looked down, her fingers brushing the strap of her purse. "I went to my sister's." "Did you?" She blinked. "Yes." I tilted my head. "Then why did Daniel tell me?" She closed her eyes, and her breath shuddered out of her. "Please." "Not tonight," I laughed softly. "Tonight is the only night I have." Her eyes snapped open. "Why would you say that?" "Because I am sick," I said plainly. "Because I do not know how many nights I will get where I am strong enough to sit here and listen to you. Because you left me before I even had the chance to fight." She stepped forward, tears gathering again. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was scared. I did not know how to—" "Love me," I said. She shook her head. "That is not fair." "You are right," I said. "It is not fair. But it is true." She sank onto the couch beside me, hands shaking. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I felt alone. I could not handle watching you get worse." I nodded slowly. "Then you should have told me." She looked like a child then, small, lost, but not innocent. Her eyes flicked to mine, desperate. "Can we fix this? Please." I studied her face. The woman I loved was in there somewhere, buried under fear and selfishness and a desire to escape pain at any cost. But the woman who betrayed me was also real, and right now she was winning. "I do not know," I whispered. She reached for my hand. For the first time in months, her touch felt like something other than absence. But as her hand closed around me, I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt everything all at once. Pain, exhaustion, resentment, a hollow space that love used to fill. She squeezed my hand harder. "Please, tell me what you want." I looked at her, at the woman who once promised forever and then left me in the darkest chapter of my life. "What do I want?" I inhaled, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I knew. "I want to live," I said quietly. Her face softened with relief. "Then we can—" "Without you." Her breath stopped, like I had cut a wire inside her. She stared at me, eyes widening, lips trembling. I withdrew my hand from hers. "Tomorrow," I said gently, "I need you to move out." She shook her head violently. "No, no, please, I can change. I will try harder. I will do anything. I will be better." "I believe you," I said, "but I will not heal while holding on to someone who let go of me months ago." She collapsed into sobs. I sat still. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like clarity, like oxygen. "I am not your punishment," I said softly, "and you are not my cure." Her sobs grew louder. She reached for me again. This time, I stood. Her hand grasped empty air. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door gently behind me, and let her cry alone in the living room, the same way I had been crying alone inside myself for months. The next morning, the house was silent, and she was gone.